The next section of sliders are called the spill suppression or color control sliders. And these are designed to remove any type of green spill that you might see in the image. To demonstrate this, we're going to go ahead and do a new project. And I'm going to load up a clip that's very susceptible to color spill here. I'll go to my Browse tab, and there's a shot called Susie Tight in White. And this features Susie in a white wedding dress. Now, the wedding dress features a nice semi-transparent veil here, and to try and key this usually is a nightmare because the veil ends up looking green. Well, the Ultra Spill Suppressor can take care of that. And again, for the background, I'm going to use something that's going to give a really high contrast to a green here, so we'll use the blue clouds once again. And we'll go back to our Keyer tab. I'll scrub through this clip. We're going to use the Set Key method because we've got a clean frame of just the green here. And I'll hit the Set Key button. I'll go ahead and scrub through this clip a little bit. Now Susie looks a little bit transparent here. So let's adjust the transparency a little bit. Just kind of dial in the Keyer settings a little bit here. We want to maintain a semi-transparency to this veil here. Now to show what the color control values do, I'm actually going to turn all these sliders off here so you can see something that you might have seen in the past if you've tried to key semi-transparency. Inevitably, if you have a semi-transparent surface on a green screen, you end up starting to get this green spill into the image. And so we want to make this look like she's not marrying Kermit the Frog. To do that, simply bring up the spill suppression slider, bring this all the way up to the right here to full value, and then usually these desaturation and color curve sliders are going to be somewhere in the middle here. You see Susie's really the blushing bride now. We're getting some magenta in the image here. That's actually the way spill suppression works. We add the opposite color to whatever you're keying on and add just enough so that it neutralizes it out. So what I'll do here is I'm going to adjust these two sliders until I get to a point where I'm only seeing that purple or magenta in the wedding veil, and it's not affecting Susie's skin tone. So right about here gives me a good shot where now I'm seeing the wedding veil is actually kind of a purple color, but I'm not seeing Susie's skin tone being affected by the spill suppressor. Now I back off the spill suppression slider to a point where it neutralizes out. Just like Video Tums, it's going to neutralize that green, and so I get a nice white wedding veil. There's one more slider here. I don't use it too often, mostly in full body shots where I have somebody walking on a green screen and I've got shadows around their feet. By using the Start Level slider, just bringing it up a hair, it will actually color neutralize your shadows. So if you light a full body shot on a green screen with harsh shadows around the feet, you can actually keep those shadows and it makes for a much more natural looking composite. The last sliders we're going to cover are the post-processing sliders. And the post-processing sliders, these actually take the result of the matte generator and then they do different modifications to the edge of the matte to help eliminate certain types of artifacting. A very common problem if you're trying to key on a DV source is something called a DCT artifact compression block. And let me show you what that looks like. We're going to start and do a new project. And I'm going to go to my Browse tab, and we'll load up the shot called Susie Medium. For a background, I'm going to take kind of a darker background. These tend to show off these artifacts a little bit more cleanly. I've got this shot of a tree here, and I'm going to drag and drop that into my background icon. Go to my Keyer tab, and again, since this clip features a shot of the green screen at the beginning of the clip, I'll hit the Set Key button. And now we can see what our composite looks like here. I'll make a few modifications to the other sliders here on the Keyer tab. Really quickly, I'll bring down the Alpha Curve slider to right about there. Bring up the Start Threshold a little bit. Let me play with the Transparency slider just a hair. And I'm going to use the zoom controls here to zoom in on a really problem area in this image. Now if you notice right here along this edge, As I'm playing with these sliders, you'll see that we're starting to get kind of a stair-step effect right here where we're keying on this particular brown color on a dark background. You're starting to see some stair-stepping happening. Again, that's caused by the DV codec. It's caused by the way the DV signal works. And the Ultra software, the matte generator, is trying its best to remove that artifacting, but it needs just a bit of help to do that. And that's where the post-processing sliders can come into play. The shrink matte slider actually pulls in or chokes the matte just a hair so that we can help eliminate those types of artifacts. This can also help if you have kind of a glow around the image and you want to try and get rid of that. Using the shrink matte slider too much, though, can actually distort the shape of the matte, and so you can end up with someone's head not quite looking the way it should, or having fingers disappear. Removing someone's fingers, that can be kind of painful. I definitely recommend avoiding that. The soften matte and sharpen matte sliders actually take the edge of the matte, and the soften matte slider blurs the edge of the matte, which can help eliminate that type of artifacting. The sharpen matte slider takes the blurred matte and refocuses it and resharpens it. So by using the soften matte and sharpen matte slider, again, you can help eliminate any type of artifacting that you might see and get rid of those stair steps that you might see along the edge. The sharpen range slider controls where we're sharpening the matte. If you've got a blur applied to the edge using the soften matte, if you soften the edge, you've got kind of a range of areas. Where do you want to sharpen that in? And the sharpen range slider will help adjust for that. So here I'll just sharpen it a little bit sharper than it was before. And you can see I can get rid of some of that glow that we had around the image. One last thing to cover in the Keyer tab, there's two buttons located down here in the corner called Preset 1 and Preset 2. These buttons are actually set to the factory default currently, so if I click one of these buttons, my settings will go back to the factory settings. So if you ever get yourself in trouble, you can always go down and click on one of these two buttons, and it'll take you back to the factory default. These buttons can also be used to save your current settings, and I actually use this as sort of a shortcut. Once I get the keyer dialed in to about 90%, and I want to tinker with it maybe just a little bit more, but I'm concerned about, maybe I'm going to lose these settings and it's going to end up not looking as good as it did a few minutes ago. Well, what you can do is right-click next to one of these two buttons, and it will give you some choices to set the preset one to your current settings. So this gives you a way of setting your current settings so you can go back to those current settings just by clicking the button. You have two different buttons, so you could actually toggle back and forth between two different keyer settings and make a choice between the two. If you need to get rid of your current settings and go back to a factory default on one of these two buttons, just right-click and you can choose to reset either button to the factory default.